All right, welcome to your first Onshape build. So this file, Byram Hills Parts Library Vex, will be shared with you. You're going to need to come over here and copy the workspace, and then I'll hit copy workspace. And then I'm just going to put my name in front and hit OK. All right, so first thing you want to notice is all these tabs on the bottom are what do we call like Data Studio tabs. So they actually have parts in them. So you can see right now I've got a chain up here. If I go to another thing, for example, like chassis rail, I'll see a 2x1x25 rail piece. And so each piece has its own sort of Data Studio tab. You can see all the axles have been put on one. I'm giving you the file with all the parts in it. So then your job will be to create assemblies where you put the parts together. So to do that, you're going to come down the lower left corner where it says the plus sign, hit that, and create assembly. Now it pushed it all the way over here. I want it to be closer to the first thing, just like it right there. And now my first assembly is up. You'll notice there isn't really much to this. There's a spot dot here. This is called the origin. There's a interface over here that you can change your view on. But the first thing I'm going to want you to do is put together a few parts so that you can not only learn how to use Onshape, but you can also see how parts are used in our real robots. So that's always going to start with your insert menu, which is right here. So you hit insert, and it'll load up pretty much the whole part library you have. The first time you do this, you see a lot of generating previews. But to speed things up, for example, I know I'm going to need a piece of metal, so it helps if you know some of the broad categories. If I go to metal, and then if I hit the metal button right now, every piece of metal that's there will populate at once, and I'll be pretty unhappy. But if I hit the little arrow to the side of it, it'll show me different pieces of metal that appear. And I'm not getting any previews at the moment, but that's okay. I'm going to pick a, let's see, 1x2x15 piece of steel. So we'll put one of those in, and it says it's inserting it. And there'll be a little bit of a delay, a spin. Here it comes. And then when I'm happy with that, I hit the green checkbox. And if I click on this and just move it with my mouse, I'm holding down the left key button right now. I can move it. And one of the first things we always want to do is attach the first piece that we put into the origin. And generally, we like to fix it in place. So we like to have a non-movable part that we put at the origin and then build off of that. So to do that, you'll double-click this part, and then you'll see these arrows appear. And if you come right to the circle where the arrows emanate from and right-click it, you see a menu appears, and we want to move it to the origin. Boop. Now, here's where we have to get into a discussion with controls. I like to use the mouse because it's significantly easier. If you want to use trackpad, it definitely can be done. But with a mouse, if I push on the wheelie button, I could just drag this and move it anywhere I want. Doing that with the trackpad, it depends on what kind of trackpad you have, but you could do like a double finger press. It could be a one press with another finger moving. It's trickier though. In any event, I've now moved it to the origin. And then the next thing I like to do is fix it in place. So if I right click this, I can choose fix. So now that's not going to go anywhere. It's just going to sit in that one spot, and everything else can be attached to it. So we've got that in place. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to attach a motor to it. So I'm going to go back to insert, and I'll type in the box motor. And it says no, I think I spelled it wrong. And they don't have the exact motors that we're using currently, but I'll show you the one that's in terms of size about the same. So the 2-wire 393 with the IME, I'll put one of those in there. And you can see the motor is now. I can grab the motor and move it. And I'm just going to attach the motor to one side. I think I'll put it on this side of the C channel. One thing about the motor, and you can spin your build by right-clicking the mouse button, and you should be able to do that with your trackpad too. You'll see, and then zooming in with the wheelie, you can see there's 3 sort of attachment points at the motor. A screw goes in here, a screw goes in there, that attaches it to your frame, and then a shaft goes in here. This is the part that spins and rotates on the motor. The shaft gets placed inside of it, and when the motor spins, the shaft spins, and anything on the shaft spins with it. to attach two parts in Onshape, what you do is you're going to fasten the motor to a spot on the C channel. So you have what are up here called different mate types. The first one you'll be learning about is a fasten mate. So if I select fastened, it'll give me a prompt and say, well, what do you want to fasten? And I'm going to fasten one side of the C channel. So if I just hover over this area, like a lot of different options will appear. So for example, if I zoom in a bit, it's easier, but I want to just attach one of the places where a screw goes right to here. So I'll just click that. And then I'm going to go find the part on the motor that I want to attach to that. So I wanted it to be one of these guys right here. I want it basically to be this. And I just got to see it better. I'll come at it from this angle, and that looks about perfect. And right away, it'll go fasten it. And sometimes you can't see it, so I'm using my wheel bar to zoom out and find out where it is again. Remember, you can zoom in and out with your wheelie bar. And it shows you the fasten mate, and basically is asking you, like, are you happy with it? Now, sometimes when you fasten it, it won't look right. So I'm going to show you what's called the offset right away. And my fasten one mate is still here. If I hit offset, I'll be given an X, Y, and Z, and I can move the motor relative to the C channel along the X, Y, and Z axis. And if I want to see where is that X, Y, and Z, I can, if I zoom in here a little better, I can see it. There's the Z going in this direction, the Y is kind of coming out, and the Z is going up and down. So say I just needed to push this motor up a little bit, I would go to the Z. And you can put negative or positive numbers, but if I put negative 0.5, that should move it about a ½ inch away from it. And I could just say, all right, I want to leave it there for whatever reason, and I could. Or I could say, put it as 0.5. Maybe I need to push it through the metal for some reason. In this case, I don't need to, but that offset button is important. It looked best when it was right where I put it because it was actually lining up with the metal. And just so you can see, if I offset it on the X, that's going to move it back and forth along this direction. So if I go like 2 inches on the X, see it bumped it over there. If I go minus 2 inches on the X, it bumps it over here. So even if when you put things in place, you find out that they're not where you want them to be, you can offset them. Another thing that's pretty handy here is sometimes when you attach it, it won't be oriented properly. And so there's an arrow here for flip the primary axis. And you can see when I do that, it immediately put it underneath the C channel, and I could put it back. There's also a rotate the secondary axis. So say I just wanted it to be 90 degrees or another 90, I'm going to put it back to where it was, but I can do that. And those are the main two things, or not main two things, but the main things you need to know about attaching with a fasten mate two parts. So now they're attached. I don't need an actual screw to attach them. That's just how I attach them. And in the beginning, you probably won't do this, but as your builds get more complex, it's a good idea to label things. So instead of just calling it fastened 1 through, say, fastened 150, you can hit the button here and say this is motor to, say, C channel. And that reminds me that that's the fasten mate I put in place. Right away, you'll notice now some things that changed. I've got a metal C channel that's been put in place, and I have the motor, and I have a mate feature that I've added. It's a fasten mate. I know it's a fasten mate by the symbol, and I know it's from the motor to the C channel. So that's step one. And usually doing Onshape, we wouldn't add all the screws and whatnot, but for purposes of knowing how to put things together, we are going to do that. So the next thing I'm going to insert is a bearing flat. This is an important piece of equipment you'll need to know. It's in miscellaneous motion, and it's right there, bearing flat. So I'll hit one of those, and I can move it. So there's my bearing flat. I'm just going to leave that there. I'm also going to hit an axle, and you'll see axles are in here, and I'm going to get a 3-inch axle and insert that as well. And it's right here. And then lastly, I'm going to get a screw. And it should be, that's under hardware. And you'll see 0.25 ½ inch screws. I'm going to get a ½ inch screw. And then say, check. And the ½ inch screw, kind of buried in the origin here. Something that's really handy. Sometimes in Onshape, you just want to get rid of parts because they're in your way. I could just grab the screw and move it, but say I was having difficulty, I could right click on the C channel, hit hide, and now it's gone and I can easily see the screw and move it. And if I want to unhide it, I come back over here and hit the button and now it's back. So what we do is anytime we have a shaft and the shaft is going to go into this motor right here, and then the shaft's going to go through the metal C channel after that. And anytime we have a shaft going through C channel, we want a bearing flat to be put in there. So I'm going to fasten my bearing flat to the C channel next. So I hit fasten. And I'm going to put it out on this piece right here. All right, pretty good. And now let's go to the bearing flat. And I'm going to get the underside. Notice one side is smooth and the other side is little rivets. So I'm going to get one of these sides with the rivets and grab that. And it actually put it exactly where I wanted. I'm going to have the shaft go through this hole. I don't have to offset anything, I don't think. It's not sticking through. That's okay. And I'll say green check. And I'll just show you that one just says fastened one. I didn't name that one. And then what we're going to do is the bearing flat needs to be kept in place somehow. So I'm going to use the screw. And the motor has a receptacle for the screw to go inside. And to help put it in there, I'm going to actually hide some of this. I'm going to hide the bearing flat, and I'm going to hide the C channel, and then I'm going to fasten, and there's more than one way to do this, but the screw right at the end to the inside of this. And I'm going to check that. Now I can see it's internal to the motor, so then I'm going to flip the primary axis. So there's that. And I'm probably going to need to offset that, but I'm not sure how much yet. So I'm going to put it in place. I'm going to unhide the bearing flat. And I want the screw head to be, right out here on top of this. So I'm going to go back to fasten to, which was the screw. And then I'm going to offset it. And I can see the Z-axis goes in and out. I want it along the Z, probably about negative 0.25 inches. And that took me a little too far. So I'm going to try negative 0.15 inches. And that looks great. And you might say, how do I know negative? The direction the arrow's pointing in will be positive and the other way will be negative. So I put that in place and that's there. I'm going to now show the C channel. And in the real world, that's what we would do. We would put a screw through the bearing flat into the motor. I'm showing you how to do this in Onshape kind of painstakingly the first time. But in all your Onshape builds after this one, you won't have to do every bearing flat and screw, I promise. Next, I'm going to put another screw. And to do that, I'm going to just right-click on this screw and say copy screw. And then right-click over here and say paste the screw. And that one, I'm just going to attach to the bearing flat. So I'm going to fasten, come over here, grab that end of the screw. And this one's going to have to be offset. I'm just going to put it at the end right now. The bearing flat's going to look funny and awkward, but we're just going to offset it in there along the Z, and it's a 1/2 inch screw, so it's probably about a 1/2 inch. I need to offset it. Oh, I guess that was too much. So let's go to 0.4 instead. I seem to be offsetting it way too much. 0.3. 0.25. Little trial and error there, and that looks just fine and dandy. Put that in place, and that screw will not stay in place without a nut on it. So that's one of the things I did not get. So I'll go back to here, and we have two types of nuts. So but if I type nut, I think it's in hardware, I'll see there's a hex nut and a nylock nut. For this situation, I'm going to use the nylock nut. Nylock nuts have plastic inside, and when the screw goes into it, it literally digs into the plastic and gives you a very, very firm grasp on the nut. The hex nuts, there's no plastic, and you can go right through them as deep or as much as you want, and they're handy for certain circumstances. Nylock nuts, if you have the end of the bolt available, nylock nuts are going to hold on the best. So I'm going to put a nylock nut in there. And here it is. And I'm going to fasten it also to the end of that screw by just hitting fasten and zooming in on the screw here to see the crosshairs. There it is. And then I'm going to go to my nut and get it on this side. and hit it here. And now it's attached at the end. I'm going to have to offset it along the Z again to get it close. So just that Z, that doesn't look like much. Maybe it's negative 0.1. Way, let's go 0.1. I'll go with that. Maybe it's 0.2. And it could actually go a bit more, like 0.22 maybe. 5. We'll get it there. There we go. Right on there. And we'll hit check. And now we've got our bearing flat in place. And the motor's in place mostly. We need one more screw to attach to this motor here. So I'm going to hit this. And let's try this again. We're going to copy it, but something's wrong. All right, fasten 5 was open. It always by default tries to make another fasten, so that's why it wasn't letting me copy that. So I'm glad that happened. Right click, copy the screw, and we're going to paste it right here. And I'm going to attach it to this. So I'm just going to spin it this way, hit that fasten mate again, and zoom in here, and get the other side. And I'm going to try to send it deep in there. Let's see what happens. What can I find to attach it to? How's that? Not bad. It needs to go in a little bit more. So we'll offset that on the Z again. I think it's 0.5. Much 0.3. Pretty good. Looks like it could come out just a little bit more. 0.25. That looks good. All right, check it. Boom. So this is actually, what it would look like in the lab. You'd have your bearing flat, your motor is now attached with screws, and then the last part here would be to send a shaft into the motor. So for that, we're going to do it a little different. Instead of using a fasten mate, we want it to be able to spin this. So right next to fasten mate is something called revolute mate. So I'm going to select that. And the only difference is that after it's mated, it's going to spin. We still do it the same way. Find the end of the shaft, click it, and then zoom in to the motor here. I'm just going to go right deep in there and attach it. Zoom out, and I can see that I put it, it needs to be flipped, its primary axis. So it's going to go this way. And now that's in there. And if I play it, I see that it spins, right? Because it's a revolute mate, not a fasten mate. And I'll hit the green check. Everything looks good on that. And now I've got a situation where I've got a shaft and a motor. And the last thing I'm going to do is get one more piece here. We're going to insert a gear. And we'll go to gears. And I'll pick a 36 tooth high strength. And take that. Now the high strength gears are designed for high strength shafts. So you can see the hole's a lot bigger. Let's just do something else here. Get a different gear. We do have metal inserts that can go into a high strength gear, which makes it a low strength gear. Basically that you can put it on a low strength shaft. So let me just find, here's a 60 tooth gear, low strength. You can see the difference. Take this. And if I spin it, can I spin it? If I double click it, let's say keep it there. And if I double click things, you'll see the arrows appear. So if I wanted to spin it in the same orientation as the other one, I think I could hit this. No. There it goes. Whoa, come back. It's a little tricky. But you can see the difference there. That's the low strength for those smaller shafts. Is the high strength. And purpose for our building, I don't care if you put high strength shafts on these because we could always put the inserts in them. But how much room do I have? I'm just going to delete this one for now. Right click and delete it. And then we're going to attach this gear to the shaft. Now the shaft already spins. So anything I attach to the shaft that I want to see spin, I'm going to fasten mate it. So again, we go to fasten. And again, we're going to pick the end of the shaft. And we'll zoom out, and then we'll pick the gear. And right away, you'll see the gear is now attached. And I'll offset it a little bit just because I don't like it right on the end of that. I think that's 0.5. On there just a bit more. And we'll hit this. And if I grab the gear, I can actually rotate it now and spin it. Other ways I can, and this is just quick and easy, you can test things. I can also come over to this Revolute Mate, and if I right click it, I get a bunch of options. I can hit animate, and if I hit play, you'll see the gear spinning, and you can see the shaft spinning. And some other things interesting about these, you have a start value, you have an end value. So if you want it to spin the full 360 degrees of rotation, to keep that. Steps is also important. It basically, how many steps is your animation? So if you want it to go faster, you can change steps to like 100 and then hit play. And now you see the whole animation's going much quicker. So sometimes we want to speed it up, sometimes we want to slow it down. There's a lot of ways you can manipulate this. Just as a beginning, maybe you can play with the steps in your build. That's it for the first build, and hope you are successful. Take care.